From the side of Team Physio Inculcator, I, Dr. Himanshu Sharma, again welcomes you all in this evening for the session on the benign paroxysmal positional vertigo (BPPV), its management by our renowned speaker, Dr. Vikas Mathur sir. Sir is a senior physiotherapist from the Jaipur. Sir has done their post graduation in the sports and orthopedics from the Rajiv Gandhi Bangalore, and sir has also been nominated as a president of the IAP of the Rajasthan branch. I welcome you, sir, from the side of Team Physio Inculcator, sir, that you have spared the time for us to share the knowledge among the people, among the participants who are present here. I also want to welcome her, sir, Ritu ma'am, and all the dignitaries who are present here. Heartily welcome to you all, and hand over to you, sir. Vikas, sir.
Thank you, Himanshu sir. Thank you, Harsh sir, Ritu ma'am, and all the participants. It's a great opportunity from Physio Inculcators to take this initiative of organizing such webinars frequently to empower our physiotherapists to do more in this time and empower them to get more knowledge from professionals who are working in various spheres from and various cities of India. Thank you so much. Okay, so for all those who are joining in, so let's wait for another 5 minutes for people to join in, and then we can start. So in the meanwhile, I have a small question for you all, so which you can start writing in the chat box, and let me review what all you know about benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. So first question for me is, what do you understand by benign? So I want people, see, अभी रात को 9 बज रहे हैं, सब खाना खा के इडली डोसा सांबर छोले आलू पूड़ी आलू के पराठे दही के साथ में खा के बैठे होंगे, तो थोड़ा दिमाग को चलाने के लिए कुछ करते रहना पड़ेगा अपने को. ऐसे काम नहीं चलेगा. अगर खाली मैं यहाँ बोलता रहूंगा तो कुछ होने वाला नहीं है. तो लेट्स डू सम वर्क एंड आई रिक्वेस्ट एवरीवन टू पार्टिसिपेट एंड जस्ट राइट डाउन व्हाटएवर यू नो विदाउट थिंकिंग कि सही है गलत है. हम सब यहाँ सीख रहे हैं. ये जो आज यहाँ हम करने वाले हैं इसमें मैं भी कुछ सीख के जाने वाला हूँ और आप लोग भी. मैंने जो अपने क्लिनिकल में समझा है वो नॉलेज मैं आपको पास करना चाहूंगा. सो आई रिक्वेस्ट एवरीवन टू पार्टिसिपेट एंड आई वांट यू ऑल टू राइट कि आपके हिसाब से बिनाइन का क्या मतलब होता है इन द चैट बॉक्स. सो Ramanandan says sudden is benign. Okay, great. और किसी को कुछ भी नहीं पता? I can see some lot of people, around 35 people are there in this room, and okay, so let's Himanshu sir, just let me know when can I start officially. Okay. Cancerous. So Dr. Priyanka Wilson says cancerous. Sakshi Sharma says it means not life-threatening. Dr. Ritu says one is tumor and other is sudden. Great. So a lot of people knows about what benign is. And some Mrs. Ayush says benign, initial or acute. Anamika Gupta says being benign means which is not harmful, non-spreading. So there are a lot of people who has already a lot of knowledge about what we are going to talk today. Great. So it's great to see that you all are participating. So welcome you all to this small seminar on benign paroxysmal positional vertigo. देखो मैं यहाँ पे जो भी बोलने वाला हूँ, I am a hardcore clinician working from last 13 years in Jaipur, and I am going to share about what my personal experiences are. हम बहुत कुछ पढ़ते हैं बुक्स के अंदर, आर्टिकल्स के अंदर, लेकिन आई थिंक सबसे इम्पोर्टेंट ये है कि आप क्या करते हो पेशेंट्स के साथ में और क्या रेस्पॉन्स आता है. तो क्योंकि क्या होता है, मैं अगर सच बताऊं तो बहुत सारी रिसर्चेस जो हमारे पास में आती है, इनफैक्ट रिसर्चेस आर मोस्टली डन in areas in countries other than India. Lot of mostly researches which we do and study are done outside India, और हमारे यहाँ पे situation थोड़ी different होती है. So I think we have to understand that and adapt to that. So the next question for you all is, what do you understand? What comes to your mind when you read about vertigo? So I want you all to in your chat boxes what is vertigo. Let's see how much you all understand what vertigo is. Quickly. Okay, Manandan says it is giddiness. Physio Amita says it is dizziness. Okay, dizziness. Mansi says it's dizziness. Wow, so many chat boxes flooding with messages. Sakshi says some episodes or false sensation of rotational movement. Wow, it's so very clear, very close to a right answer. So you all know what vertigo is. A lot of people have some idea about what vertigo is. So I think the dizziness is basically a sensation of fainting or unsteadiness. And when this false sense, when you see this false sense and you feel that in your surroundings are spinning or moving, it is basically referred as vertigo. So this is what we know about vertigo. बहुत commonly जो अपने हिंदी शब्दों में कहते हैं जिसको चक्कर आ जाना, और ये सब कुछ घूम गया तारे, और वर्टाइगो वो सेंसेशन जो हम अपने चारों तरफ सब कुछ घूमता हुआ महसूस करें, स्पिन करता हुआ, दैट इज वर्टाइगो. आंसर ऑन 1 is
Hello, Vikas sir. Oh, I hope there is some network problem and interruption. Vikas sir is not more here. I will be with them soon. Please be connected. Yes. I hope Vikas sir is no more here. Let us try to reconnect the Vikas sir. Be connected. Thanks for being patient. Hello, Vikas sir.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes sir.
Yes, sir. I think you have been disconnected.
या पता नहीं सर कैसे हो गया था.
No
सर एक
issue,
बार
no issue.
मेरे को
Sir,
को होस्ट
there
बना
might.
दीजिए आप.
Sure.
ओके.
Now you are host, sir. You can present.
ओके सर. So we were here. So it's something not very serious and lasts for a very short time, and it is usually instigated by a change of position and gives a false sensation of movement. So it's very important to understand the anatomy of inner ear when we talk about BPPV. So basically, the inner ear consists of two important structures. One is cochlea and one is vestibule. So cochlea is associated with more of hearing issues concerned with more of hearing stuff. And when we talk about vestibule, basically it is comprising of three semicircular canals oriented at 90 degrees to each other, anterior, posterior, lateral, and they are together called as the labyrinthine system. And there is a labyrinthine fluid which circulates between these channels and which is responsible for basically maintaining the balance of our body's balance with the neck. And when this fluid basically is responsible for because it causes the most of the difficulties with vertigo. And the second one is lateral semicircular canal and the anterior semicircular canal. So we'll be talking about them in detail in the coming few minutes. So basically, BPPV was discovered by Diggs Helpikes in 1952, and he described a few important features of nystagmus. So now, can you all tell me what nystagmus is? Can you all write down in your chat box what nystagmus is quickly? Let's see what you all understand by nystagmus. So basically, it's an abnormal sensation of motion, which is elicited by certain critical positions, and usually it is yes. I have some answer first. Very good answer is involuntary movements, oscillation of eyeball. Yes, yes, right. Basically, it's an involuntary movement of eyeballs and to and from movement of eyeballs. In case of positional vertigos, it is basically instigated by change of position of neck. So at least 20% of the vertigos go undiagnosed. And usually when we talk about positional vertigo, it is a very, very important indicator in case of vertigo, because when we put the head into a certain positions, these nystagmus are provoked. And usually with that, the kind of nystagmus we have, we can find out which kind of positional vertigo it can be. So it is abnormal eye movements, maybe vertical or horizontal, can't control eye movement. You have some very good answers. So basically, let's look at what are the causative factors which are responsible for causing these positional vertigos. The most important being inactivity. बहुत सारे लोग ऐसे होते हैं पेशेंट जिनको कि कई बार बहुत लंबे टाइम तक इनएक्टिव रहना पड़ता है किसी डिजीज की वजह से, कैंसर की वजह से, और ओल्ड एज के अंदर जो बहुत टाइम तक वो लोग ज्यादा पोजीशन चेंज नहीं करते, उनके अंदर ऐसा पाया गया है. And it is also observed in patients who have got intoxicated by alcohol in acute conditions that they develop positional vertigo. And the other important patients are major CNS surgery patients. तो अगर मैं अपने हॉस्पिटल की बात करूं तो हमारे पास में इस थर्ड कैटेगरी के पेशेंट बहुत सारे आते हैं, बिकॉज हमारे यहाँ बहुत हेड सर्जरीज होती हैं. स्पेशली अगर बात करूं तो पोस्टीरियर ऑक्सीपिटल फोसा के अंदर ट्यूमर्स की एंड ट्रॉमास की, जिनकी वजह से रेसिडुअल कई बार पोजिशनल वर्टाइगोज रह जाते हैं. एंड ऑल ऑफ देम हैव टू बी डिस्टिंग्विश्ड. वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट दैट इन द कमिंग few minutes. And the fourth important point are CNS diseases. A lot of vertigos can also be associated with other diseases of the brain. हो सकता है वो सब पोजिशनल वर्टाइगो नहीं हो, लेकिन हाँ उनकी वजह से वर्टाइगो जरूर होते हैं, चाहे है वो कई बार माइग्रेन की वजह से, मल्टीपल स्क्लेरोसिस की वजह से. तो दैट वी विल बी टॉकिंग अबाउट नाउ. अगर हम कॉजेस की बात करें, सम करें, तो 39% ऑफ पेशेंट्स ऐसे होते हैं जो हमारे पास आते हैं जिनका हमें रीजन पता ही नहीं है कि उनको होता क्यों है ऐसा. दैट मेक्स इट टू अ वेरी लॉन्ग बिग परसेंटेज. एंड अराउंड 29% ऐसे लोग होते हैं जिनको ईयर इश्यूज होते हैं, जिनकी वजह से उनको वर्टाइगो होता है. दैट कंप्राइजेस ऑफ ओटिटिस मीडिया, वेस्टिबुलर न्यूराइटिस, माइनस डिजीज, sudden sensory motor hearing loss, autosclerosis. So all those comprise to around 29%. And another is 21%. तो 21% में अगर पेशेंट्स होते हैं जिनको कि ऑक्सीपिटल एरिया के अंदर इंजरीज होती हैं, या पोस्टीरियर फोसा के अंदर पोस्टीरियर ऑक्सीपिटल एरिया के अंदर इंजरीज होती हैं. So all these can get. Okay, I have got a message that can you in English? Sorry, yeah, I'm sure. I'm sorry. I thought we have a lot of people who can only follow English, so I will keep it to English only then. So if we talk about the symptoms, The symptoms mainly comprises of vertigo, which usually lasts for 20 to 30 seconds, maybe lasting for maximum of 1 minute. And usually it is triggered when the patients change their position, or they change their position in the bed, or when they get up from the bed. It is the time that they develop those symptoms of vertigo. And usually these symptoms are also accompanied with nausea and vomiting. We have to differentially diagnose positional vertigo before deciding for any treatment. So if we talk about somebody has Mrs. Pooja Gupta has wrote about Meniere's disease. So we are going to talk about that, ma'am. So Meniere's disease, basically, we have to distinguish it from why BPPV in the way that basically Meniere's disease also is associated with tinnitus, that is ringing in the ears, hearing loss, and vertigo, which lasts from seconds. And usually the vertigo which is found in Meniere's disease not provoked by postural change like what we have in benign positional vertigo. And usually the diagnosis is more done by ENT experts by audiogram. The second important thing disease which we need to differentially diagnose with BPPV is vestibular neuronitis. Usually the vestibular neuronitis, again, people have vertigo episode which lasts for a few days, and usually it happens following a viral infection. And there are certain patients with have changes due to positional change, but it is not specific to the head position, so we cannot exactly tell that it is a positional vertigo. And mostly when we do a Dix-Hallpike test, which we'll be studying now, are very mild, produce very mild symptoms in these patients. Then the third important reason is labyrinthitis. So basically, labyrinthitis is usually again by the infection in the labyrinthine fluid, which is found in the middle ear. And there are positional changes which produce vertigos, but again, they are also associated with other issues like hearing loss, and the Dix-Hallpike test stays negative in these type of patients. Another cases are perilymphatic fistula patients. They are associated with tinnitus, hearing loss, and the vertigo in these patients lasts from seconds to a few minutes. And usually the vertigo in these patients are not produced or provoked by postural changes. And usually for the hearing loss, again, they have to go for an audiogram, and which describes that it is more of an ENT issue. And then as I said earlier also, there are a lot of CNS disorders like migraine, multiple sclerosis, posterior fossa tumors, ischemic diseases like cerebrovascular accident, vertebral insufficiency. All these diseases also produce symptoms which are very much similar to positional vertigo. But then the other things are also present with them, and usually the Dix-Hallpike tests are negative in this. And the other important thing to remember in such patients is that usually when they have nystagmus, the nystagmus usually do not fade away in them easily. It usually lasts for a long period of time, as compared to what we have studied earlier, that in benign positional vertigo, the nystagmus lasts for a very few seconds to maximum 1 minute. But usually when there is a CNS disorder, the nystagmus lasts for even more. Then there are patients which have to be very commonly we are getting in our OPDs are patients with cervical issues. And I think a lot of bunch of patients constitute this kind category of patients. And this is where we have to be very careful in deciding whether we have to give a patient a cervicogenic treatment, or we have to give a patient a positional vertigo treatment. So usually if we see in our clinical practice, usually the cervical cases do not have nystagmus, and their dizziness lasts longer than as compared to the positional vertigo. Like we studied that in positional vertigo, the dizziness lasts for hardly a minute. But in case of cervical cases, usually the patient may have more disease symptoms and they may last for longer. And also the cervical issues mostly we see are complicated with some sensory and motor symptoms as well. So they have to be differentiated with positional vertigo before planning for any treatment. So coming on to how we can differentiate positional vertigos. As I said, there are three semicircular canals: the posterior semicircular canal, the lateral or the horizontal semicircular canal, and the anterior semicircular canal. So usually when we distinguish the category of patients which we have to treat, usually the 90% cases would be posterior semicircular canal patients. 8% be in the anterior canal patients. So usually the most common subclassification patients which visit our clinic are unilateral posterior semicircular canal patients, which we'll be discussing in the coming slides. And the another important thing with respect to discussing the pathophysiology is the canalithesis and cupulothesis. So basically, as we have just read about the relevant anatomy, the utricle is holding that labyrinthine fluid, and there are the calcium carbonate crystals which are usually there in the labyrinthine fluid. And sometimes these calcium carbonate crystals try to flow with the labyrinthine fluid, and the hair follicles in the labyrinth usually get stimulated, and they sense the motion which is happening in the labyrinth through the labyrinthine, and then the vestibular nerve gets activated through these hair cells and sends the impulse to the brain, and then the brain acts by deciding where we have to rotate our head. So mostly the these three canals are responsible for detecting the movement which we happens in our neck, that is the forward motion, the backward motion, the front, the back, the left. All these motions are determined by the motion of the labyrinthine fluid in these canals. Which gets into this canal, and when these are moving in this labyrinthine fluid, sometimes they get stuck in the cupula, and which is a very dangerous condition in the terms that the nystagmus usually last for a very long period of time in the cupulothesis patients, as compared to the canalithesis patient when the otoconia is flowing in the canal. So the nystagmus is more prominent and lasts for long when the patients have cupulothesis type of problems. So the cupulothesis was discovered by Harold in the 1962, and as it says that the otoconia crystals usually get stuck to the crista ampullaris, which is present in the uvula. And in the canalithesis cases, which was discovered by John Aples in 1980, these are the free floating present in the canal. So now talking about how BPPV is, like it is usually found frequently in 10 to 64 people in 1 lakh people. Mostly the women are more affected than the men. The older population has more incidence of affection there as compared to the young people. Young people are more confined to have it when they have a sustained and head trauma of more than less than 35 years of people. Usually when we have BPPV, the usually attacks are very sudden, and which may last from days to weeks depending upon the severity of the cases, but mostly the cases resolve in a few days or probably a week. And then there are certain cases occasionally in certain cases where it can last for years, depending if maybe probably because of some CNS disorders or some other underlying pathologies, because there have been researches which have also shown that certain drugs can also lead to vertigos like chloroquines and sulfadines. They also patients. So as I said, the posterior semicircular canal patients are the most number of patients with 90% chances. They are the called as the classic post SCC patients. They usually it is seen that they have geotropic rotatory nystagmus, which means that usually the beating of eyeballs is towards the earth, and it has a rotatory component. And the horizontal canal usually sees a horizontal nystagmus, a to and from motion on the left and right sides. And as I said, that cupulothesis and canalithesis, when I discussed, I said about that cupulothesis as the otoconia crystals get stuck in the ampullaris. There are more, they get more non-fatiguing nystagmus. The eyeball movements are very vigorous and last for a long period of time without getting rest. In case of canalithesis, usually the nystagmus lasts after the position is changed within a 1 minute or two. So it is very important to understand what a classical BPPV patient look like. So unilateral, it is, as I said, the most common ones are unilateral posterior semicircular canal type of positional vertigo. With that, I want to ask you all in the group, how many of you have seen patients of positional vertigo? And what was the main symptom you saw when this patient visited your clinic? I want you all to write down in your chat box, please. No one of you have seen? Okay, yes. So Ritu ma'am has seen, Vipin Parikh sir has seen. Okay. Can you please mention which was the main symptom when these patients visited your clinic or hospitals? Okay, Pooja says nerve compression was the cause. Okay. See, this is where please participate in this because it is going to get us a lot of answers. Maybe a lot of answers will get we'll get in when we are talking and chatting and describing what you have seen, and I will be able to share my clinical experience only when I know what you all have seen. Okay, so basically, if I talk about classical BPPV and cervical origin but had positional pain dizziness, Sneha Joshi says. Jitendra Minal says intense dizziness. Okay, great. Episode of spinning movement and dizziness in some specific head movement, says Sakshi. Okay, and Vipin sir says they cannot be able to walk from the bed and lying on the same position. Very good. Himanshu sir says patient has sudden severe vertigo while positional change. And Mansi Jain says yes in cervical patients. Okay, so like a lot of things we have already covered with when we talked about cervical differential diagnosis. So usually now we are going to talk about how we are going to make a confirmed diagnosis that this patient is in the category of positional vertigo and is not any other cause. So usually when these patients visit us, if I share my experience in my hospital, we usually have these patients visiting to us on an OPD basis, and also a lot of patients who have severe symptoms are also referred to us by the neurologist when they are admitted in the hospital for the treatment. So usually when patients are visiting to us in our OPDs, which are often referred by our ENT and neurologists, these patients often are in such a state that they are very much they are feeling nausea, and at times a lot of times it has happened that when we have been trying to do some kind of maneuver on them and these patients have started, they have puked or they have vomited in our department. So usually in my experience, if I share, when such patients come to us, usually it is very important to assess whether that patient will be able to sustain your treatment, whether the patient has any other comorbidity that you may end up causing harm to the patient. So a very detailed evaluation is required. We are only talking about in terms of positional vertigo, but the other things have also has to be taken into consideration before putting up the patient in any position. Because when we move forward, you will definitely see that when we plan any treatment for these patients, even an evaluation part, it has to be taken care of that which patient can be screened and which cannot be screened, because then we need to find out some alternative solutions for such patients. So let's coming on to what classical positional vertigo patient look like. So usually these patients have, as I said, geotropic nystagmus, that is the downbeating nystagmus toward the earth. It is mostly rotatory, very fast, and as soon as you change their position to upright position, usually the nystagmus goes away, and it will is affected. So once you move the patient to the other side, usually it will fade away. Or if you make the patient stand, it fades away. And if you repeat the same things again and again, the intensity of the nystagmus will fade away. So this is a small GIF file of how we can evaluate. I've just taken this to show you what angles you can use to find out the patient. So usually when we are planning to evaluate a patient, as you can see, this patient has been put into 45 degrees of rotation. So for this patient, we can see that she is bent, rotating on the right side and going into extension. So a rotation of around 45 degrees and an extension of around 30 degrees. So now my next question to you all is, which all patients you will not try to do this? Let's see how many of you can answer this. Which patient you believe cannot be put in this position? Please write in the chat box. So this is one of the evaluations which we have to do for screening the patients of positional vertigo. Yes, very rightly said, Himanshu sir. Cervical injuries. Okay. Okay. What kind of injuries? Cervical patients. Yes. So that's good that you all know that we have to, as a physiotherapist, need to understand cervical injuries, facial edema, head injuries. Okay. Okay, great. So basically, my point here is you need to understand, because as I said that if you have seen my slide, why I told you that 64% patients are females which are affected, and that also above the age of 50 years. So you can understand in India, a lot of people who are osteoporotic, they have cervical degeneration. So we need to assess their range of motion pre-hand, whether to find out whether they have that much of range of motion, whether they have any neurological disability, they have any motor loss in their arms or legs, and whether we will be able to put them into such positions. And other than that, it is also required that a lot of patients who visit to us in such for these kind of treatment, who have vertigo symptoms, are also post-operative patients of post-operative neuro patients who have undergone some surgeries for either ear, or they have undergone surgeries for their for tumors or for any CNS disorders. So we need to respect those positions for them also. So as I think I am clear here that what we are doing is we are for this particular pose, if I say we are checking her for right side, 45 degrees of rotation on that side, and around 30 degrees of extension. So this is another clip. You can see how this physiotherapist is checking her. The patient was in long standing position. Then her head was rotated on the right to 45 degrees, and then it was taken into extension out of the couch, and then nystagmus was evaluated. Once you see nystagmus, you can immediately, I will tell you what you can do after that immediately. But usually the test, what we do is we need to, why I'm emphasizing on this test is because this is the core of understanding what a positional vertigo patient has to be screened way, the screening way. So is right rotation, extension, holding in this position, looking for any nystagmus if the patient has, and then quickly moving the patient into sitting position to find out whether the patient has any symptoms of vertigo. Usually the patient complains of, they will try to hold you on, they will have severe dizziness associated and also nystagmus. Like I want to talk about one more important point here after my next discussion. So this is one of my patients whom picture I have taken just for your illustration. That was on a GIF file. And now let's see how we can evaluate this patient. See, this is for the left side, rotated on the left, extended, hold it for a count of around 30 seconds, then taken into extension. We have reduced the time here just because to keep this video short for your understanding, but usually it has to be done for around 30 seconds because there is a latency period in which we see the symptoms. Just review it once again. I'm playing it once again for you all. Rotated to the left, extended, hold it for, if the patient start to feel symptoms, you have to immediately stop there. If the nystagmus appears, then also you can stop there. If the patient has severe complaints of dizziness, you can stop there. That also is a positive sign. So this is how we usually do a Dix-Hellpike test. Now coming on to what we do for the treatment. So before I talk about this treatment, I want to tell you all what I was emphasizing is, see, a lot of time the patient come to us, and as we have clearly stated that we are going to look for nystagmus, and at times patient do not show any nystagmus. Then also we treat those patients, because it is not that only nystagmus is the sign which reflects that this patient has positional vertigo. In patients, this is I'm telling you from my personal experience, that there are patients who doesn't have nystagmus but they find it dizzy, and then we treat them and they feel better. So Mrs. Jitender, Mr. Jitender has asked, is there any risk involving when doing the test that patient may collapse? So what to do in that case? I think it's a very valid question. Yes, that's why we are screening them properly. As I said, we are taking a prior assessment of patients' comorbidities associated with the problem, whether the patient has undergone any cervical surgeries, any upper thoracic surgery, any head surgery, or any other chronic ailment which can affect that patient. That's why I wrote about the incidence of such patient, that mostly the patients, vulnerable patients, are elderly patients. So they might be having a lot of comorbidities, and it has to be addressed pre-hand before planning of any evaluation part. So this I have already shown. So now the treatment part, coming on to the answers to us. So like in patient says that I have a lot of difficulty, and it has been patient says that I find it very difficult to lie on the left side and also on the right side. So we need case if the patient says that lie on right at all, so then we can think of that left, so that right is more affected side, and so then we can plan to start the treatment from the right side. Then also other options are, as I said, a lot of time we get patients who visit our OPDs and clinics when they have a lot of symptoms. They are in very severe affection, not able to take any position. Like what we did for Dix-Helpike test, sometimes we are not able to put these patients in those positions as well. So what we need to do is we just have to understand by as usually the patients will come and say that it is very difficult to lie on the right side or the left side. So what we can do actually is we can position those patients in such a way, in a recumbent, in a semi-recumbent position on sideline onto one side, the side which comforts them more. The affected side can be kept up, and they can be put up around 45 to 60 degrees of recumbent position, kept there for some time before planning for any treatment. Because at a lot of time we have to abandon the treatment, and we have to wait for this symptoms to subside and then only plan it. Because see, it is not only that the patients will get with these very sick patients, and severe patients will not get better with only consuming the Vertins and Cimetal medicines, which are, they will have to undergo this maneuver to get them permanently fixed. So let's see how the Epley's maneuver works. So like first part of the treatment maneuver is exactly the same as what we did in the Dix-Helpike test. Let's see this for the patient of left side. Again, the same part, like the Dix-Helpike, same rotation on the left and extension. Hold it for a time. To hold it here, you have to console the patient. Please bear with us. You will be all right. And then patient has to be, the neck has to be rotated on the other side. Then the patient has to be rotated on the other side. And then the patient has to be made to sit, and with keeping the neck into flex position. So I have done this in a very quick part because I wanted to keep this video short for your understanding. So, but when we do it, we have to keep it. Usually the book says that we should hold every position for not more than 30 seconds. But believe me, in my experience, I've seen that when patients, I keep the patients and I observe their nystagmus, I wait for the nystagmus to settle, I have found better results. So usually it is only about consoling the patient that please wait, you will be all right. And we have seen that once the nystagmus gets into subsiding in different positions, the patient experiences better. And you can repeat these cycles from 3 to 5 times in case if you feel that patient is ready to cooperate you and patient is getting better. So usually we do, there is no fix that we will do 1 cycle, 2 cycle, 3 cycle. It is on patient basis. And I am not teaching here what I am doing. You can make your own rules. Probably you may have a better, you may do plan it a better way. You may get results in 1 time, you may get it 2 times. Because we do it at sometimes 3, 4, 5 times also. And because a lot of patients come to us in our hospital who are not residing in our Jaipur city, they are residing in outskirts or other parts of the city, and we have to ensure that we give them maximum out of their 1 session. So this is the position usually we recommend after the treatment. Usually when we finish our Epley's maneuver and we ask the patients to be in that particular position which suits them, like in case if the patient was left-sided affected, we will put them in the right with the right side up with around 45 degrees of inclination in a semi-Fowler's position. And we will keep them in for 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll ask them to walk a little bit. Once they feel better, we will prescribe them these position to sleep at home, and they usually feel much better after that. Now the other type of semicircular canal disorders are lateral or the horizontal semicircular canal disorder. As I said, these constitute to about 2 to 8 or 3 to 9% of cases, and usually these kind of patients actually come in after a treatment has been done to posterior semicircular canal. So if I talk about what I mean is, like a lot of patients, usually this is not a very common condition, or this condition actually happens after the treatment of posterior semicircular canal. And it's a little tricky. It's not that easy to get fixed like how we have fixed for the posterior canal. It takes a little while. Usually the patients have more severe complaints in terms of nausea, because usually these patients have difficulty in turning in the bed. So they can't turn on one side, or they feel that everything is moving around them when they take the turn on the left or on the right side. So, and as I said, cupulothesis is more common in these kind of patients because the otoconia particles are stuck in the ampullaris, and usually the nystagmus last for much longer as compared to other the posterior canal. And so we prescribed a modified Epley's maneuver or a Lampert's maneuver in this. So it is also called as a barbecue maneuver. So this is a picture which I have taken for a patient. Like in case if we take a lateral semicircular canal patient of right side, this is a picture for right side lateral semicircular canal positional vertigo patient, and the technique is called as the barbecue maneuver. So if we can see this picture, so we begin this treatment in supine position, then we turn the patient on the unaffected side, that is the left side. Then we make the patient come into prone position. Then the patient comes on the right side, and then again supine, and then we make the patient to sit. So this is how we go, and this is the I'll play a video to demonstrate you all what we usually do in this patient. So see, so this patient has right side affected. So we first was in supine, then we turn on to the left. Then from left side only we turn into a prone position. From the prone position, we turn onto the right side. We are holding and are talking to the patient all the time, watching the nystagmus of the patient. And then we ask the patient to come in supine again. And then once we think he is fixed, we make them him to stand. Just watch it again. So this is a patient of right side affected lateral semicircular canal. Patient first from supine is rolled onto the left side, is holded there for a few minutes, a few seconds, I would say. Then into the prone position, then onto the right side. And all the time we have to talk to the patient, look into his or her eyes to see the nystagmus, then straight, and then we'll make the patient stand, sit. I'm sorry. So this is how usually it happens in the barbecue roll. You can see once you start to roll the patient, your neck rotation happens, the particles in the labyrinth start to, the canals start to move. So anterior semicircular canal patients are very rare patients, usually mostly associated with either trauma or any post-surgical patients, and rarely, usually they are more around 2% of such patients, which requires a very intensive kind of treatment in which we use, I have not included that here. We usually do not do that kind of treatment, but these patients have mostly nystagmus which is not settling down, so we have to shake their heads very quickly and move into them into a different position, which is helping them to get better. So as I said, when we are planning for a BPPV treatment, we have to be watchful and waiting and before planning any treatment and deciding. Patients usually will be having vestibular suppressant medications in case if they have been we get a lot of patients who do not stop. Usually they do not show the signs and symptoms. And then it is very important that after these maneuvers are done, a rehabilitation plan is planned for these patients, which will keep them better and the reoccurrence can be reduced. So what we did was the cannulate repositioning maneuvers. And in case if the patients do not respond to such treatment, there are surgical options available from labyrinthectomy, posterior canal occlusion, singular neuroectomy. And I have not seen much of these surgeries done, but the record says that they are good in case of non-responding cases. So then there are other also techniques available which are done, but usually we do not follow these too much. But this is Simon's maneuver, in which the patient is moved into the left and onto the right side simultaneously in one go only. So like in the left side, then again the patient is made to sit and again taken into the right side. This is also one of the ways of doing it when you cannot roll the patient in various directions. But usually I have not experienced it much, only a few times when the patient was not cooperative. This is a very important exercise for people who cannot be put into various positions. And when we know that patient will not be able to follow up very regularly, and we have to prescribe these exercises. These are called as Brand-Dandruff exercises, which can be done easily. First, the patient is made to sit, and then the patient is asked to go in a position in one side in which the patient takes his neck into rotation of 45 degrees, extension, and then lies down on the one side and watching the ceiling. Hold it for a count of we can say around 30 seconds. Then again gets up, sits up, and does it on the other side, going down on that side, rotating for around 45 degrees, taking the neck into extension, and then looking at the ceiling and holding for this position, and then returning to sitting. Usually we prescribe them as doing it 5 cycles in one go and twice daily. Then these are the very important exercises which we prescribe the patients to do during the rehabilitation time. These are the eye movements: looking up, down, looking alternatively to the left, to the right, convergence exercises, bending alternatively forward. Not all the exercises we prescribe to every patient. It is, we have to be selective in deciding which patient will be able to do which exercise, and this is how we prescribe. And usually I have just shown these exercises because a lot of patients who do not come with a mechanical dysfunction, rather they come to us with some causes of CNS issues, CNS surgeries. They have a nagging issue and they take a little while to get better. And so we have to teach them these exercises so that they try to get habitual and adapted to the situation, and the body also starts to respond, that they do not get these frequent attacks of vertigo. Then there are gaze stabilization exercises in which we ask the patient to focus on one certain object at various angles so that they do not get symptoms of dizziness very frequently. Usually complications of the cannulate repositioning maneuvers are around, failure chances are 25%, and recurrence is 13%, 6 months. Again, I have taken this data from some research works. And the side effects, usually this is very common, is nausea, vomiting, fainting, and sweating. Sweating is very commonly I've seen. Fainting I have not seen much. Sweating, yes, patients who are severely affected, I've seen them sweat a lot, and we have to sometimes hold on for the procedure, reassure them, make them sit or stand under the AC and fan, make them relax, and then repeat the procedure. And as I said, the lateral semicircular canal vertigos are little tricky ones to treat, but yes, it is not intractable. They can be dealt with. So that's all from my side. I am open to questions from you all. I hope this was I have conveyed some information which is useful for you all. I am open to questions. Over to you, Himanshu sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very, very much for this enlightening session and for a great elaboration on the topic of BPPV, especially for the students and the freshers who are supposed to work in the field of physiotherapy, and that we must have a clear idea that vertigo can be having the various origin. While getting a detailed analysis, detailed history taking, then we can go for the rehabilitation of the vertigo, or we can say the vestibular rehabilitation. So it is a great topic, and I think it can take a lot of time. But in a very short time, we have explained everything from starting to the diagnosis till differential diagnosis and the basics of the management. So it will make you us to be involved in the area of the vestibular rehabilitation. Now, I would like to ask anyone, if anybody have any question, they can ask. So someone is speaking.
Okay. So
Can you
yeah.
see the chat
So
box,
I
sir?
think I think there is a, sir. I will just stop this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so there, I can read from the question chat box. There is a question which says how to differentiate cervical and BPV. So even cervical cases supine to sit position, patients get dizzy. So yes, when I was telling about differential diagnosis. I clearly stated that these patients usually will have a component of nystagmus, and usually these patients will complain of a very short-lived vertigo sensation as compared to cervicogenic patients. And yes, then there is a question about we hold each position for maximum 30 seconds or at least 30 seconds in Epley's maneuver. So ma'am, I would say please refer books. I would say the book says, some books says it is 30 seconds, some says it is 45 seconds, and I say I hold it the position for the patients till I feel that the nystagmus has not disappeared or the patient is not letting me hold the patient in that position. I have seen better results in that. So I think you can make your own rules, and once you start seeing a lot of patients, you will get to know that. Because I work in a hospital which has a lot of neuro patients, so we get a lot of lot of patients every day, and that's why we have been able to design a certain things and which have worked out well for us. But in case if you get some new things and work out better for you, please share your ideas with us. And then there is a question: can habituation be considered as a treatment option? I guess yes, habituation is definitely a treatment option, because at a lot of times when the positional vertigo causes are traced to post-surgical, like there are patients who have unstable conditions of neuro origin, like when a lot of time we have patients. So I will give an example for this patient. Like around a month back, I had a patient who had been undergone a post neurosurgery patient who a cancerous tissue was removed from a glioma was removed from his brain, and patient was so much vulnerable that the patient had a lot of times already undergone for a hydrocephalus treatment. Patient had been 2-3 times operated for hydrocephalus, because the patient has a tendency of developing increased intracranial pressure very frequently. So such patients, I would avoid doing any kind of these maneuvers, and I would rather keep them little more conservative with form of exercises with these patients. Does that solve your query? And as about habituation, because a lot of time, as I said, in case if we have patients of lateral semicircular canal and patients who are non-responding or are have severe problem, what habituation does is it makes them accustomed to that environment and surroundings, and usually patients the response to treatment also improves. Then there is a question about females get more affected, sir. Any particular reason? I'm sorry for that. I'm not very good. That is what I've copied from book. I'm sorry. If I get to know something about that, I will surely let you know. Can you briefly explain cervical issue dizziness exercise or any maneuver? Yes. So, Ramanathan sir has asked this question. So you need to understand, when we talk about cervical and when we have cervical patients, usually their first complaint, usually they will be visiting us, will be either pain, or if they are coming to us with dizziness, a lot of screening would already been done to them. Usually such patient may also have vascular insufficiency. We usually evaluate them for all those things. And also a lot of patients who come for postural disturbances to us, we have tilt table in our hospital. So we also do a tilt table examination to rule out we do to rule out that they are not suffering from postural hypotension. So that is another thing which we do for such patients. And for cervical patients, what we do is we first evaluate their range of motion. So usually if we talk about cervical patients and their dizziness, usually their range will be restricted either in the rotations and mostly in the extension. And sometimes combined movements also hurts to these patients and elicit the symptoms of dizziness. So I think if we go, and there is a George's test, if you have heard of, which is very frequently used to rule out any insufficiencies which can appear in patients due to cervical regions. George's test, which is a sequential test in which neck is taken into various positions and we try to trace out which position is putting the patient into dizziness. Okay, then there is a question, is these exercises are indicated in hypotension? Hypotension, which exercises are we referring to, Ritu ma'am? Is this exercise are indicated in hypotension? I guess if patients have hypotension, yes, hypotension, I doubt there is no problem in doing a positional vertigo in non-hypotensive patients in case if we are talking about that. And about forward bending also, yes, no issues at all. Because in case if you talk about Indian population, a lot of females are already hypotensive when they come to us. And as I said, we because we have a well-equipped neuro department, we have usually when the patients are referred to us by neurologists, they have already noted down their blood pressure. And then we also have, as I said, we have a tilt table, we have sphygmomanometer with us. So usually whenever we are in doubt, we check for the blood pressure as well. Then there is a question from Jitendra ji, how and when the patients can be asked to wean off from medicines like Vertin, Stemitil, etc. immediately after maneuvers or gradually? So usually, sir, my answer to this question is usually when the patients are coming to us, a lot of patients are already onto these medicines. And once the treatment has been done, I have to tell you that a lot of patients come to us who are on these medicines and still not getting relief. So what we do is we do these maneuvers, tell them to continue those medicines as prescribed by the neurologist, and then gradually wean off as prescribed by the neurologist, because I think I am not the right person to comment on when this medicine should be stopped. But usually there is a fixed dosage, and when in our system we are able to patients clearly understand the dosage are usually slowly reduced, and then the patients are weaned off from these medicines gradually.
Thank you, sir, for a detailed elaboration on the topic. And it is our pleasure, and we are honored to have the Jitendra sir and the Kalpana ma'am directly from the Jamia Hamdard. They are the senior professor there, and they are usually with us since last few many sessions. So I'm very thankful to them also. They are joining the session. They are making us proud, and we are heartily thankful to you, sir, ma'am, and Vikas sir. You have find the time for us. You have shared the practical things with the individuals so can have their practical experience, and the experience can be different because every individual has a different perception. They have a different type of recovery, so that can be a little bit different in any individual. But if we will do evidence-based practice, definitely results will come. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for finding a time, and it's already late for you because you have one more meeting after this. So I would like to say thank you.
Thank you so much, physio inculcators. Thank you so much, physio inculcators, and all the attendees. You can always directly connect me whenever you like for any more queries. Thank you so much.
Yes. Again, at the last, I would like to announce one more thing, that tomorrow we have a session on the ACL injuries, and the day after tomorrow there is one more session. It has been planned, will be posted soon on the Facebook. It is about the rehabilitation of the ACL injury. So tomorrow we'll discuss about the assessment, differential diagnosis and assessment of the ACL injury by Dr. Dhruv Taneja. The day after tomorrow, Dr. K. Ganeshan will take over the topic ACL injury rehabilitation and their specific techniques. So stay with us, stay tuned. We'll be tomorrow at 8 p.m. again. Good night. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Vikas, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.